Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Two Fish at the Table Poker Podcast. Last time we talked about poker movies, but this time we're talking about poker documentaries. I'm one of your hosts, East Coast Sam, and here's Ben. What's up with the tissue there?
I mean, this poker action gave me a nosebleed, so I just had to stuff this in my nose. But I think I'm feeling better now.
Oh, good, good, good. So it's nice to see that you're 10 for 10 now, right?
I'm 10 out of 10 perfect now. But I'm not one of a kind. I'm a twin, so I'm two of a kind. But
Nicely done.
yeah, so poker movies we kind of have an asterisk because a poker movie is really can be a vague descriptor. A poker documentary, I love documentaries.
Me
And
too.
so many different forms a documentary can take. It can be, sort of a narrator driven sort of thing like a Michael Moore or a Morgan Spurlock movie. It could be more
Mhm.
like kind of like a, eighth grade history class documentary on the Civil War. Here's timeline 1861, 62, etc. And some can be kind of more of a raw look into someone's life. And luckily, we kind of have a mixture of all of those sort of documentary styles here on the three films we'll be discussing on this episode of the podcast.
Yep. I mean, we have three different formats for documentaries. We have one half hour, 20-minute documentary, 1 hour long documentary, and then one feature length documentary. So that was intentional. We decided to pick documentaries of different lengths and different subject matters. All of them come from roughly the same time period. They're within 10 years of each other. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to get this one started.
Yeah, we caught a little bit, not a ton, a little bit of flack for our overpraise, supposedly, of the 2014 main event when it aired on ESPN for that, run of episodes. And ironically, I guess it must have been pretty popular amongst other people too, because not only did we have All In Magazine's Mark Newhouse kind of highlighting that spotlight of poker life, but two of our three documentaries cover the same summer, the
Right.
2014 main event, as well as just World Series Poker in general. So I don't think we're that far off. Maybe that we're talking about one of the more popular eras or years in modern poker, that being 2014. But rather than dawdle about the details, let's get right into our very first of our three documentaries. This one being called 10 for 10 Martin Jacobson, referring to the $10 million prize that he won for winning the main event, as well as the pocket tens that he won the final hand against Felix Stevenson with against his ace nine.
And also the $10,000 buy-in.
That's true too.
Yeah, $10,000 for $10 million, winning it with pocket tens with a set on the flop. I mean, just you can't write a movie like that. It's just
Yeah.
so perfect, all those details.
Yeah. And this is a 22-minute. To even call it a film is a bit misleading. I mean, ESPN has these programs that are like, NFL yearbooks where it's like a half-hour block covering, one season of an NFL team. It's kind of in that vein where it's covering, one event for one person or one team in this case, a group effort to win the final table. It to call it a documentary, it might be a bit of a stretch. I mean, it's a documentary, but it's not a it's more of a brief kind of snapshot into the main event that year by the lens of Martin Jacobson's perspective. And
Mm.
but to its credit, though, it does kind of cover a bit of the backstory, but leading up to that fateful summer for Martin Jacobson before covering sort of the events at the final table.
Yeah, I mean, this documentary is about Martin Jacobson as a person and also his preparations leading up to the final table. Keep in mind, this was the November 9 era, so they had, 4 months of downtime before they played it out. And, I think you get a lot of sense of who he is as a person, that he has this friend group of all these people who helped him out. He mentioned at one point that he was going to hire a poker coach and a mind coach and a nutritionist and all these people to help him out. But then he realized he had that support with his friends already. And so it's really going through his mind and his preparations leading up to the final table. And honestly, like the day before the final table, I mean, that's where a lot of the footage comes from. There's a couple of talking head interviews with Martin and his family, and you get a sense of his backstory. But it really is about this, crazy moment where here you are. He was eighth in chips to start the final table, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you can't expect to win the final table off of that, but he went hardcore with his friends. Each of them simulated a player's actions, and he practiced combinations of players on his left and right so he'd get position down and chip sizes down. I mean, he really paid his dues here, and that's what you get a sense in this documentary.
And it makes for a semi-amusing contrast of the ninth place finisher Mark Newhouse, who infamously had zero prep. So you see the power of preparation. You have a guy that went full blast, simulations, not just of nine-handed play, but of down to five-handed play, and figuring out who would be in the final five. And to his credit, he had Newhouse. He assumed Newhouse would still be in the mix as the table would dwindle down there, which is kind of funny. But just just the level of detail and how close this was to the actual actions is less than 24 hours from the final table. So some athletes, they kind of take a whole day to clear their mind before they go to a sporting event or something like that. But in his case, he was not letting up on the preparation, and it obviously paid off for him with the final results.
Yeah, and the final table was split over 2 days. They played down to three-handed, and then they played the rest of it out. And you see footage in between those 2 days, like right before he's about to go up three-handed. The people are talking to him, and his friends are saying, like, you can change your bet sizes against Felix. You're raising a little light. I mean, it's just these specific little details that give you a sense of how high level he and his friends are thinking. Like, he really was paying attention to every detail to put himself in the best position possible to win.
Yeah, it really makes you think back to all those kind of old school main event final tables where it just kind of felt like whoever got cards would kind of be the one to take it down. In Jacobson's case, it was a short stack for the majority of, I would say, really the first half, two-thirds of the table before he got a little bit of traction. And so when you're that low in chips, that's just because you don't really have the cards to really make it work. And so that's why he was so important to do those queen seven plus shoves from the button at that final table, because he was just so card dead and really kind of locked in by the fact that Tonking and Van Huff really kind of dominating the knockouts and the chip counts in that first half of that final table.
Yeah, and I mean, besides that, in terms of a sense of his personality, I mean, right at the start of the documentary, we have this clip of him talking about how he feels as though identifying as a poker player has disadvantaged him. We also hear about how he first played the main event in '08 and he busted on like the third hand, and so he leaves and goes home. And we get a little bit of sense of his life since then. And it's really, he comes off as like a great guy. He knows that he's a professional poker player. He's not curing cancer or anything like that. He trained to be a chef. So you sort of see his interest in food sort of moving in and out. You see there's this one shot where he's taking, I don't know, multivitamins or something else. And this table is just like filled with bottles of like medicine. Like, I have no idea like what these different pill bottles are. And then he later orders room service, and it's like avocados with white rice or something. So he's like eating super clean before he starts. It's just little details like that give you a sense of not just how he's preparing, but also who he is as a person.
Yeah, and once in really the second half of this 20-minute documentary kind of goes into the montage of the action with the bust outs, Newhouse out ninth, Politano out eighth, counting down until there's only three left, where that's where kind of Jacobson really kind of grabs the reins at that table and gets takes control. And all the while there's sort of these superimposed shots of him doing his yoga, because that was a key part of his his mental acuity and his mental focus. And it kind of culminates when there's the infamous ace, I think ace three, ace 10 hand, where he makes a snap call of Van Huff's all in pre-flop with the ace 10, and it ended with the yoga pose or a meditation pose. And that was for me really kind of the most impactful shot of this entire documentary.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching that hand and, hearing Esfandiari say like, oh, if I have ace 10 there, I don't know. And then he snap calls and Esfandiari's like, oh, well, he had a read on him the whole time. And yeah, it's that mindfulness, that ability to stay focused when you have seven big blinds. It's just, it's one of the most impressive poker performances of all time for that reason, that he didn't check himself out. He didn't say, all right, I'm going to try to ladder up. He was going for the kill the whole way through, even when he was a short stack. Yeah, I mean, it's, the back half of the documentary with the sort of bust out montage, it's not super, important or part of the documentary. I mean, you just very quick shots of each player and what place they got and how much money they won, and then it's on to the next one. But this is a pretty sleek documentary in terms of its presentation. They used high quality cameras. There's a lot of music from different artists that they use. Maybe a little too much music for my liking, but it just kind of gets a sense of how much effort the documentarians put into this too. Even, for a 20-minute documentary that aired on YouTube. I don't know if they put this in film festivals or anything, but it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, overall, the content of this 20 minutes is not a ton of super new information for me. but
Mhm.
it's very well put together. It's stylish. It flows by, and if you watch it at a little bit faster speed, it's even shorter, which I didn't do. I was just there this time around to watch it at faster speed. But I mean, it's just a fun little quick watch. It's nothing that's going to change your life or make you rethink about poker or anything. But if you are a fan of the main event, of poker history, of ESPN, of just the main event winners, then this is something that you should definitely check out. I give it like a 7 out of 10. I mean, it accomplishes what it wants to do. It's not documentaries sometimes have a big purpose or mission or message. This is not that kind of documentary.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'd give it a 4 out of 5. I'd say it's a good documentary. It's very economical. Again, it's very well put together. I like over the end credits how it's not just the end credits. You hear commentators talk about Martin winning, and then you get him just partying, like pouring drinks for people, playing craps after he's won $10 million. It's a nice little documentary. It's nothing super profound. Reading in the YouTube comments, people are like, "This is so inspiring to me." Like, "Oh my God, Martin, you're awesome." And yeah, you definitely get a little bit of that sense. But it's not, yeah, if you're interested in poker on an amateur level, if you're a hobbyist like Ben and I are, I'd say give it a watch. I think you'll probably like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it got me off to a strong start on these documentary watchings. Again, these three documentaries we're discussing were all brand new to me. I might have seen bits and snippets of the 10 for 10 here and there, but
Mhm.
watching it from start to finish was a brand new thing for me. And I know you had said that you had watched it before, but the other two we were going to discuss were brand new to you, right?
Yeah, 10 for 10 I'd seen before, one of a kind. I think I'd seen small bits of in like a poker compilation video, and then Nosebleed was completely new to me.
Got it. So moving on to our second documentary here, we have One of a Kind, The Rise and Fall of Stu Ungar, produced by ESPN in 2006. 46 minutes long, so conceivably it would have aired in a 1 hour block on ESPN, much like just any sort of 1 hour program would. So again, a documentary. I mean, sometimes channels like ESPN kind of will air stuff as a program, not so much as a documentary per se, but I still
Mhm.
think it qualifies as a documentary. But again, it kind of adheres more to the kind of that almost something you would see in history class about a historical event sort of style film.
Yeah, I mean, it's a low budget television documentary. It's not really capitalizing off of any one thing in particular. I'm not really sure why they commissioned this documentary. But yeah, I mean, they do have a lot of talking heads from a variety of different people. They have Doyle Brunson, they have
Steve
Mike
Zolotow,
Sexton,
Mike.
yeah, they have Stewie's ex-wife. They have Stewie's daughter. They also have audio tapes of Stewie talking about his life. Apparently, he was supposed to write an autobiography before he passed away. So they have that. And then, a lot of really flashy editing choices, even though, again, this is a low budget documentary. The introduction to this documentary is like a minute and a half long. And it's this super, I don't want to say edgy intro, but it kind of is. There's like these flashes of crows flying around, and there's all this language of like poker is the infinite swirl of deadly possibility or whatever, like all these highfalutin words. Apparently, the narrator was J.K. Simmons.
Oh,
I
really?
saw that in the
I,
credits
I
there.
didn't pick up on that at all. Wow.
Yeah, I thought that was weird that they, I don't know what his attachment to poker is, but anyway, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting little documentary on certain levels, but on the other hand, having just seen the Stewie movie that we saw last time, it's a little of the same thing, just in a documentary format.
I almost kind of would call the Stu Unger Wikipedia the movie because I had read his Wikipedia page, before, and obviously I mentioned it briefly in the document in the movie episode we did last week, and it's a lot of the detail is just going to be like copy pasted out of the documentary into Wikipedia as if like that was the primary source for a lot of these sort of facts and stories that relate to Stu Unger, and so that also added to the like not necessarily new knowledge that I would grasp about Stu Ungar's life that we hadn't already covered in High Roller or on Wikipedia. So that was a little bit unfortunate. And it is a pretty traditional style of a program about a poker player or a historical figure. In that case, you have interviews with people that knew him that could relate the stories about him, and then obviously his family gives sort of a little bit of interviews about what they were privy to. It's funny because they intercut just random kind of sound bites of Stu Unger into the film. And it kind of reminded me of season 2 of Making a Murderer because they just have like random clips uh, of I forget his name now.
David Avery.
David Avery just like talking like I just want to go home. I don't want to be like just to be randomly inserted into episodes in season 2 of Making a Murderer, and I kind of had that same sort of vibe when it just kind of randomly have him talk. But it was my first time hearing Stoner speak. Like I had seen like pictures of him, and even in the main event, clips of him. I don't think he really was talking per se in them, so it was kind of cool to see how he spoke because he didn't sound like how I would have guessed him to speak. And
Hmm.
I'll give the High Roller movie a credit for the voice of the Sopranos actor that played Stu Ungar. He sounds close enough to him in vocal just tonage that it wasn't the worst casting, I guess, from a voice standpoint, which is often for me a sticking point in movies and reenactments. But it's if you haven't seen High Roller, this
Hmm.
is a perfectly fine way to learn about Stu Ungar, I suppose, if you haven't read his Wikipedia page either. But it didn't light me on fire this film.
Yeah, I mean, the best parts of the documentary for me were Stu's audio tapes. To actually hear his voice and hear him go through what his life was like and the mistakes he made, I think was just really captivating. And also with his daughter and with his ex-wife, to hear him as a father figure, and that he was actually not a terrible father figure, that he was passionate about his daughter. Well, he
Every,
was.
every every bad father is passionate about their family oftentimes, but how they enact that in real life doesn't always manifest appropriately.
Perhaps, yeah. Perhaps that's right. Perhaps that's right. Yeah, I mean, to hear again just the sort of sense of what he was like off the table, that away from the table he was more generous and sort of kinder, even perhaps generous to a fault. I mean, there's a story that Doyle Brunson tells about Stu Unger that he finds some like homeless guy in the street and gives him $100. And Doyle Brunson's like, "Did you know that guy?" And Stewie says, "If I'd known who he was, I would have given him $200." Like he was just sort of that type of person, and yet drugs and also ego and just the high intensity of poker just all eventually went to his head, and eventually his body just burned out.
I was probably my favorite like little moment I enjoyed was the fact that it was Doyle Brunson who mentioned the whole collapsed nostrils from drug use
Yeah.
because I'd read that sentence on Wikipedia, but I didn't imagine Doyle Brunson would be the primary source of that factoid. So that was kind of funny, and we actually do see some genuine 1980s footage of Brunson against Stu Unger for the main event championship in 1980. So that was kind of cool, and we do the same for 81. So that was kind of because ESPN, so they obviously would have access to to that archive footage. So that was kind of cool. But again, nothing particularly new or insightful when we're both at this point above average experts on Stu Unger from someone who didn't know him in real life. So it really takes a bit more specific detail and insight to really provide me something brand new to learn about him.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem I have with it is just how repetitive the documentary is. Like, they really want to hammer in the fact that he, was this promising poker player, this smart guy who really could have done anything with his life. And he decided to play poker instead and got addicted to cocaine. And that sort of led his life in that direction. It's the same tonal emphasis that High Roller had. I mean, High Roller had him talk to the devil for an hour and a half and then eventually die. I mean, it's this, it's sort of the way that like Kurt Cobain and other sort of tragic artists have been treated, to the point that their myth almost occupies the whole thing, and you forget that they actually, that Stu Unger was this great poker player who had won 5 bracelets. And they mentioned toward the end of the movie, like, it's a shame he didn't live to see the poker boom, because then he would have won 5 more bracelets and been a huge star. It's like that emphasis is lost when you're just saying over and over again, he ruined his life. Here's a flash of some crows on the screen. Here's his gravestone. It comes off as very excessive.
I agree, and again, it's not a program that's trying to redefine documentaries or poker history or anything. It's just trying to tell the information about Stu Unger, which it does do. I feel like if I hadn't seen High Roller or read the Wikipedia page about Stu Unger, I probably would have given it like a 6 out of 10, 3 out of 5. But having come in with that much knowledge, I really would jump it down to like a 2 out of 5. I mean, it does its job fine. It's not offensive. It's not painful to watch. It's just nothing for me at this point in my life that was particularly insightful.
Yeah, a documentary that's a 2 out of 5 for me is forgettable, and that's what I would say this as. It's a 2 out of 5 serviceable thing. The best things are those audio tapes that they have. I mean, I'd be curious to hear them if they're out in the public domain or not. But beyond that, yeah, I mean, if you've read Stu Unger's Wikipedia page, if you're familiar enough with him as a person, you can skip this. Otherwise, you can get a basic sense of what his life was like in between all the shots of crows.
But so after after having seen those next two, I didn't know what to think when you gave me the link to see Nosebleed. All these films, by the way, are available on YouTube for free
Mhm.
for you guys to watch with us and tell us your thoughts on. But with Nosebleed, I saw that it was about an hour and a half long. It covered two plays I'd never heard of before,
Yep, same here.
and I didn't know anything of what to expect or what kind of film it would be. And to my surprise, I was really entertained and engaged by Nosebleed, covering the 2014 poker summer of Alex Luna and Sebastian Sabic.
Yeah, I mean, these are two guys who were at the time very high level online players, although Sebastian had retired somewhat. And they both, the start of the documentary is them talking about their time in nosebleed, $1 million a hand sort of games, and then eventually trying to have a run at the 2014 World Series of Poker. And it's a fairly low budget documentary. It seems like there was only like one guy filming it the whole time and then editing it and directing it. But yeah, I mean, I was surprised by this too. I mean, I found it online. I looked at the IMDb score. It seemed like the score was okay. And yeah, I was really interested by the story of these two guys who, again, are online, more cash game professionals, giving it a go at tournament poker and what that is like.
Yeah, some documentaries just kind of have like one camera crew following on that subject for a period of time and just capturing the raw adventure or antics of the time period that they're filming during. And in this case, it's covering the majority of the World Series of Poker in 2014. That's all the events, including leading up to the main event and the PPC and mixed games. So that these guys, the filmmaker really got a raw look at two guys that are friendly. These guys were not childhood friends. They met each other in early adulthood in the poker world and then became very close. And they live together and they strategize and talk about poker gameplay and poker and plans and really share almost like a brotherhood in the poker world for this movie. And even though it's not the main focus of the film, I really enjoyed that vibe I got from watching them do their thing.
Yeah, and each of them aren't like super like outgoing, like charismatic guys, but they're charismatic enough. Like they clearly can explain to the camera what they're doing. They have a good rapport with the camera person as well as with each other. I mean, these opening shots are just them, standing in their kitchen playing poker side by side with each other, and they're talking about hands and they're showing each other what they're doing, and you get a sense of just what their camaraderie is like. And joking about having a documentary being made of them. I mean, Sebastian apparently tells the players he's with that they're being filmed and this could affect their action. Like it's just little things like this that just add a sense of personality to each of these guys who, again, I'd never heard about before. So I'm not going into this expecting anything. I'm like, these guys are pretty cool.
Yeah, and also, these guys were online players, and I kind of felt like this could have been a film version of the show called 2 Months, Two Bracelets instead of 2 million, two
Yeah.
guys, because these are online pros. And it's funny, it always seems like whenever we get a TV show or movie about online players, it's always about how much they won in the past, and then when they're on camera playing, they always lose. It's like they never quite can back up their supposed, track record when they're being filmed. Which I guess again, standard deviation. You're not going to have a winning session every time, but that's just kind of a little funny thing. Like how legit really is all these accolades of playing online. But the first part of the film really does cover them playing online. Having some losing sessions, talking about the poker online heyday when they were sort of big sharks in the water that they could expunge money off of, and a lot of all the online amateurs that they were profitable against. And then it dives into going to Las Vegas, event by event, playing, trying to win a bracelet. And in Alex's case, he gets off to a very strong start, getting to two final tables in relatively short order in the early goings of that summer.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear their approach to tournament poker because Alex says at one point, it would be ridiculous if I retired without winning a bracelet. And yet all throughout, they're talking about how they regard tournament poker as so different than cash games and online play that they describe the main event as playing a lottery, like it's not even really a poker tournament. This sort of like weird love-hate relationship with tournament poker. I mean, at one point they even mentioned like, when you get down to the final two tables, it's super intense, but if you bust early, it doesn't really matter. It's so interesting to hear about that as somebody who I don't like cash games at all, and I really like tournament poker. to hear that dichotomy is just so interesting.
Yeah, and with an eighth place and a fifth place finish, I didn't know what to expect as far as
Yeah.
next couple events. Did he win a bracelet? Did he make a deep run in the main event that we just never saw on TV? It kind of fizzles out for the most part as far as the massive success. But with two guys, both Alex and Sebastian playing, each they have two horses in each race whenever they do a tournament. And all the while, we're hearing we meet some guys like Sylvain Loosely, who
Yep.
they're close friends of, and Loosely very successful in the main event, a couple deep runs in the last decade. So we're seeing familiar faces here and there. And again, having been in the Rio, about 1 year ago actually to today, it was again that nostalgic like, oh yeah, I've been there, I've felt the atmosphere of the poker room when chips are flying and cards are dying, and so again that sort of it's a very raw look into the Rio again, which compared to like the edited main event on ESPN, I appreciate it because that was again my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there's no Hollywood treatment here where, they make, 15 final tables and there's all these crazy hands. Sometimes they just lose, even though they're obviously great players. I mean, they won $1 million plus playing online poker. Sometimes they just lose and they walk out of a tournament. They just go, well, I lost. Like
Yeah,
none of them seem upset about it at all. They're just like, I lost. On to the next round. I'm going to go play cash now. It's
yeah.
just, really gives you a sense of what that life is like.
And we learned about their sort of informal rivalry of Gus Hansen, and there's a great bit where after playing kick the can before the PPC, Gus Hansen kind of shows him, kind of looms over the table looking at Alex, and it's kind of weird because we don't really see from Gus's perspective why he's there, or what his true thoughts are on the duo, but it really adds well to the sort of combining these elements of their stories to what they captured at the table in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of these run-ins with all these big players. I mean, it's so weird to hear Phil Ivey almost be looked down on by these guys. They're like, yeah, we've beat Ivey in every hand for the past 2 years. And you're like, Phil Ivey's the greatest of all time. Like, how can you be saying that? And yet it's like, it's true. Like, these guys did beat Phil Ivey out of a bunch of money. Here's Gus Hansen, who's a great player. They beat Gus Hansen out of a bunch of money. And then here they are at these tournaments losing. It's just so weird to see all this.
And really for me, I'm always I'm trying. I think that I kind of view this movie Nosebleed as a half and half hybrid of 2 months, 2 million, and the Negreanu Worlds of Poker vlogs on YouTube.
Yeah.
You kind of combine those two together, you would kind of have this kind of movie. And I like both halves of that sort of formula. So it's kind of cool to have a marriage of those two in a true hour and a half long form. And I really, if this had been at a documentary film festival, I think it would have been pretty good for non poker players to kind of get a more intimate look on the poker world from a more realistic and less Hollywood perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult when you're recommending something to people who don't know poker super well. I mean, I've had a lot of conversations about just this podcast with people who don't play poker, and people know what poker is and they've had experiences with poker, and yet you talk to people, you talk about things like, for instance, Phil Ivey or GTO or something else, and they looked at you like you've grown an eye on your forehead. Yeah, I mean, I'd say if you're somebody who you know a little bit about poker and you understand sort of the dynamics of tournaments and stuff, you'll get a lot out of this. I mean, it's a bit trickier with somebody who's, like they're new to poker. This is sort of their introduction to poker. Would they like it? I think they would. Again, Alex and Sebastian are charismatic enough people, and you get a sense of also a lot of what they do in their downtime, hanging out with friends, doing games where they gather their credit cards together, and whoever gets the credit card drawn has to pay for dinner, which in Las Vegas must be like $100 for a glass of water. So that's a lot of money.
The same game they put on 2 months, 2 million as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. You get these little senses of who they are as people. And then at the end, there's a long scene where Sebastian's like walking through Las Vegas and he's talking to the camera about how lucky he is to be a poker player and where he sort of came from and all that. And I thought that was a really good scene because it really got a sense of who he was. Yeah.
I mean, I think my favorite scene actually was a conversation between a few friends when they discussed what are the odds of someone young dying in a year, and
Yeah.
comparing that to the odds of winning the main event. They're like, I have as much chance of dying this year than winning the main event. So let's live in the moment here and try to win this thing. And Alex goes out in day one of the main event, and he finally kind of drops the detached facade of like not caring, just trying to move on to the next one because he definitely felt like was building towards something important for the main event. And then Sebi was out in day two, so really pretty unglamorous, nothing. So Adam, our boy Adam, triumphs both of them with his day three streak compared to their day one and day two luck there. So, these guys I think I've seen Alex's name appear now time to time in chip counts and various events in Europe. So I think he's still playing tournaments, maybe not as much as he would have in this summer 8 years ago. But I do hope that he gets a bracelet, and hopefully Sebastian gets a bracelet. I hope that if they still play online poker, they're being safe and not putting their livelihood at risk, because that's my fear about online poker is someone just kind of plugs away another thousand, and then all of a sudden they're broke.
Yeah, my fear is just ultimate bet happening again. It's just my fear. Yeah, I mean, they seem like, guys with heads. As I mentioned, Sebastian was sort of semi-retired. He described himself as being halfway between an entrepreneur and an athlete. That's kind of the approach he has. I mean, when you have that sort of mentality, you can run a business very well. You can do a lot of different things. So I imagine they don't have all their money tied up in poker. They've got investments and stuff.
Yeah. I would say if I had to give this movie a score, for me, it'd be an 8 out of 10. For a non-poker enthusiast, I maybe put it 7 out of 10, because a lot of the lexicon and maybe the small details wouldn't be as appreciated. But I still think it provides a unique look at the poker world without being overly flashy or overly stylized.
Yeah, I mean, I give it a 4 out of 5. Again, this is a very good movie. I'd probably see it again. I think it's, again, just the interesting take on having these two experienced online players who prefer cash games. We didn't mention this. Seb doesn't cash in a single tournament. He plays, I think, 15 tournaments? He didn't cash in a single one, but he breaks even in cash games. I mean, just goes to show that dichotomy there. Yeah. This sort of approach of these two players who want to win a bracelet, sort of have that artist quality and then just can't do it, while still being just very, taking it well, engaging people. It does make for a good documentary. And again, if you have a little bit more of poker knowledge and you understand the lingo and what goes into a tournament, I think you'll get a lot out of this. If you're, more of a hobbyist or don't have so much experience, my advice is get a little bit more experience with the game and then watch the documentary, and you'll probably get a lot out of it.
Yeah, so all in all, I mean, on average, we average a much better movie watching experience than the poker movies per se. But again, we're just picking 3 public access movies, basically. We're picking films that anybody listening to our podcast could watch and, have a very similar or very different experience watching, but with no paywall blocking the ability to watch them. So we'll definitely keep our eyes open for other poker movies of any sort to discuss, in the details of how they represent poker and what they do for the viewer. But I think we would be remiss to not at least talk a little bit about the 2022 World Series of Poker Europe that's happening as we speak.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
First 5 or 6 events have since concluded, mostly kind of the smaller buy-in events. Not too many Americans or pros that we would really know all that well were playing in. But then last night, things took an exciting turn where the 25K Platinum High Roller event concluded, and we had a number of prominent pros making deep runs, including our defending champ, Espen Jorstad, as well as American, or not American, but common poker pro known Shaun Deeb and Negreanu, both making very deep runs, making it to 3rd and 4th place respectively at the final table.
Yep, and Paul Flois won. He was the co-founder of Tridden. So I've seen his name before, like he's been in the run for stuff. So he finally won his first bracelet. Yeah, I didn't see too much of this. I didn't watch much of the event. So I'll leave it to Ben to talk about it. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting to, a lot of the events beforehand, not too many big names. I know it's a couple small names here and there. So it's nice to finally see an event where you have so many people actually make a deep run.
I mean, something that I can discuss here is that this main event this final table, the whole day of action in that tournament was streamed on both YouTube and Twitch. So a bit different mechanics than if it was streamed on Poker Go. I have some complaints about the stream actually, because a decent chunk of the commentating relates to reading off the comments. And because the comments were so, where's Negreanu, is he still in, yada, yada, it really kind of annoyed me, in that people, and it's okay. I mean, you're going to have random folks typing whatever they want, but don't just ignore them or something, because it really, just took my attention away from the poker action, particularly since they spent a decent amount of time on the money bubble, playing from 12 down to 11. So that was a bit of a shame. And it was a couple of guys I was not familiar with in the booth talking, so I didn't really love their commentating. Not to mention one was shilling out for Shaun Deeb, like "Go Shaun Deeb, let's go" the whole time, and that was pretty frustrating. I think it's better when it's a pretty biased a rooting interest by the guys in the booth. I mean, I can Norm would always have his like costume of John Hasper Blumenfield, and that'd be kind of funny, but it wouldn't be too overbearing on his chatter in the booth with Lon or even Esfandiari. But in this case, it really annoyed me, and it just made me think that if you're going to stream this, your final table, you gotta think about, put more thought into who's going to be talking and how they're going to cover the action, because guys like Nick Schulman and Ali Najad and Lon and Norm, I think that they're light years better than what we got in that stream last night.
Yeah, I mean, when Norm is doing stuff like the things you mentioned, it's clearly a joke on how the person is dressed. And, same with him shilling Ivy. Again, it's a bit of a joke versus, that style of commentary where it's clear there's just bias.
Yeah. So, but again, Negreanu has cashed in the 2 events he's played in. So on his blogs, you can check those out, and you'll see that he's, playing pretty good. He's gotten pretty unlucky. He lost with 5s against 4s when he was all in. So he would have had, decent chips if he'd won that last hand that he busted on. But maybe we'll see him make some further final tables in the last couple events, and maybe he'll turn things around and get that elusive bracelet he's missing for almost a decade. You never know.
Yeah, he's 3rd right now in the 8-game mix event with 173K. That event also has Jack Sinclair and Shaun Deeb, though they're short stacks. And also Isildur is in the hunt as the very short stack with 8,000 left. So curious to see how he does. And then the main event in Europe starts on the 11th. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and maybe we can try to do something special for the main event final table. Maybe we can find some way of live covering our watching of it or something. Maybe just to mix up. I mean, obviously the time difference in Europe might make things difficult, but we can look into maybe having some sort of interactive experience watching that action live.
Yeah, sure.
But guys, this is going to be a relatively short podcast. I didn't have a ton to say about a couple of these documentaries given their brevity and their content, but I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion of poker documentaries. Again, we're not giving up on watching more poker movies or documentaries or even just regular poker TV, but we're mixing things up, seeing what we like talking about, and so you can expect to see more of our discussions about this content.
Yep. And then just as an update on the Mindsport Olympiad, they have sent out an email recently. So the Grand Prix, which is the online tournament, is actually going to start on January 27th. So earlier than they did the last couple of years, where they did during the summer. That's Friday, January 27th, and it'll go to March 12th, which is a Sunday. They have announced that they are going to be doing poker events on Poker Stars. However, they haven't announced what events they will do yet. They have announced a bunch of board game events. There's going to be Settlers of Catan, Marco Polo, Seven Wonders, Lost Cities, Hex, Hive, all these games, some of which I've never heard of. They're also going to do chess, draughts, Othello, Dominion, backgammon games. I mean, this is, one of the biggest tournaments in the world for board games and chess and all sorts of different things. So if you're at all interested in that sort of stuff, I believe it's all free online. You can go and sign up for that. Again, haven't announced what poker events there will be yet. Last year, they ran it in the home games group, which was very beneficial for me. So I don't know if they're going to do that yet or not. And again, the exact schedule is to be determined, but that is when it's going to happen. And then there will be the live event, which will start on August 20th. That's a Sunday in London, and that will run until Monday, August 28th. So I'll give any further updates if there are any. But I give my fullest recommendation for anybody who's interested in poker. I mean, they ran a great job last year with this, ran a bunch of tournaments of different types. All the players are really good and really kind to each other. We talk on the Discord a lot. So feel free to give it a shot if you can.
Yeah, and I'm calling it now, Sam. You're going to get at least 1 silver medal, no more bronzes, or at least you're going to get 1 non-bronze medal. And I'm going to try to get 1 medal myself. I didn't get any last time, but I didn't play too many events, to be fair. So we'll look to increase our control over the Mindsport Olympiad here as a podcast here. So
yeah, I mean, I got so lucky last time. I mean, oh my God, it's I mean, again, this all the players played really well. I really mean it when I said that. Everybody deserve the win. So hopefully I can get a couple medals, but we'll see. I don't know. Fingers crossed.
But in the meantime, guys, thank you for listening to our podcast. We'll see you next time. Enjoy your poker, enjoy your TV, enjoy your poker on TV.
Take care. You are all 10 for 10.